Do you get any strange or noises, things in your home that happen that
Since Jeff found out his wife Mary was pregnant, he's been working on converting his basement into a man cave, or as he called it, an office space. Everything was going well for the first few weeks, but that quickly changed. The noises he heard had a million things passing through his mind, but he never expected to find what he did. One day, while Jeff was getting rid of the old tiles, he heard a strange sound echoing through the empty basement. He stopped what he was doing and listened, thinking he was imagining things. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. However, as Jeff was about to go back to chipping tiles, he heard the sound again. Jeff was startled by a sound coming from his usually quiet basement, so he got up and started looking around to see where it was coming from. There was still a lot of rubble and old furniture in the basement, so it could have come from anywhere. It would be a long search, but he couldn't just leave whatever it was lying around. Jeff spent 2 whole days searching through everything in his basement, but he couldn't find anything. It was as if the sound was coming out of nowhere and disappearing in the same direction. By this point, Jeff was a little freaked out, as he had a long-standing fear of ghosts in basements, and the sound was starting to reignite those thoughts. When the time came to head down to the basement the next morning, Jeff had to convince himself there were no ghosts in his basement before he could go down. Jeff wasn't usually this freaked out by anything, but the persistent sounds from the day before really had him on edge, and his thoughts about supernatural entities weren't helping the matter. As soon as Jeff stepped into the basement, his ears were assaulted by the sound. A chill ran down his spine as he thought of what might be causing it. But Jeff suppressed the thoughts and convinced himself that there had to be a logical explanation for what was going on. However, there was nothing logical about the constant buzzing. Jeff searched the room again and again, but the more he searched, the worse the buzzing seemed to get. It was as if the sound had imprinted itself on his mind, and he could no longer get rid of it. It became so bad that for a moment Jeff thought he was losing his mind. It continued for months, and during that time, Jeff just decided to ignore the basement altogether. But one day, his wife asked him what was going on, and when he told her, it looked like she didn't believe him. That really bruised his ego and forced him to continue his work down there. But before he could do that, he needed someone to confirm he was still in his right mind. So he asked Mary to go down there and check. Mary was heavily pregnant by then and had no interest in walking down a flight of stairs to get to a dark, creepy room. But she wanted her husband to finish his man cave, so she agreed. Mary stayed in the basement for about half an hour, and when she returned, she was very frustrated. She hadn't heard anything and didn't understand why her husband was acting the way he did. Since Mary checked and heard nothing, Jeff felt compelled to complete the job he had started. He went back into the basement and started again. But whenever Jeff was down there, he kept hearing the sound. Every single day the sound would come at least once, and on other days the buzzing was persistent. Jeff tried to ignore it, but one day he had enough. The sound already freaked out Jeff, and after days of hearing it, he was determined to find answers. He sat down and listed all the possible causes. As he was doing so, one thing seemed to stand out above the rest. The most plausible thing Jeff could come up with was that there was a wasp nest somewhere in his basement, and since he still had only one light, he wouldn't be able to see it. Convinced that he had found his answer, Jeff headed to the department store. He planned on installing lights when most of the work was finished, but now was as good a time as any. He picked out designs for 2 main lights and bought a few little built-in lights to add some extra flair and help him catch the annoying critters that made his life a living hell. After installing all the lights, Jeff looked around the room and was surprised to find that there were no wasps. He had redone the roof so the lights could be installed, added an extra layer of insulation, and covered the old brick wall with slides that housed a new design. But there wasn't a nest or wasp in any of those areas. At this point, Jeff had run out of options and was convinced that his mind was playing tricks on him. There was no evidence to suggest that the sound actually existed, and since his wife couldn't hear it, it must mean that it wasn't there. But Jeff would soon learn that it wasn't a figment of his imagination at all. After months of hard work, Jeff's man cave was finally finished, and to celebrate, he had invited a few of his friends over to watch the game. They were all having a blast when Jeff heard the buzzing again, but the strange part was that it seemed like all of his friends could hear it too. As the sound came, all of them became quiet. They sat in silence until the buzz came again, and then all of them burst out laughing. The group asked Jeff what was making the sound, and he admitted that he had no idea. His friends saw it as an opportunity and immediately started listing all possible items that could make buzzing sounds. Some of the things they thought of were downright funny, while others were creepier than Jeff would have liked. "A massager," Mark yelled. "No, I told you it's the spirit of a man who died when he had his man cave in this basement. He's probably just looking for some entertainment," Anthony said. Even though Jeff found the antics amusing, he couldn't help but doubt the thoughts he'd had for the past few months. His friends just proved that he wasn't hearing things. But what was causing it then? Jeff looked at his friends in all seriousness and told them about everything that had happened since he started building the man cave. They seemed intrigued, and for the first time, Jeff felt like someone was taking him seriously. The boys had always loved an adventure, and this was one they couldn't pass down, so they agreed to help Jeff get to the bottom of his buzzing problem. The 6 of them got up and each picked a side of the room. After that, the search began, and by the time they were done, they had basically taken the place apart. Couch pillows were scattered across the floor, picture frames were skew, and all the alcohol was standing on the bar. There was only one problem. They couldn't find the source of the sound. They guys had searched every nook and cranny of the basement, but came up empty-handed, just like Jeff did every time he searched the place. Disappointed, the guys cleaned up and returned to their game, but each of them were still thinking about their adventure and what the possible cause could be. That was until Anthony spoke up. "I've got it," Anthony shouted. "It was a very clever prank Jeff orchestrated to get us to work together." The rest of the guys saw it as a plausible explanation and congratulated Jeff on convincing them to join in. But Jeff knew the truth, and there was no game behind it. Sadly, he was left to figure it out on his own again. A few weeks passed, and Jeff was settling into the new workspace he had created in the basement. But one day, after a work meeting, he realized that the buzzing had stopped. He hadn't heard a sound since his friends came over. It was a relief to have some peace and quiet. But that wouldn't last very long. Now that the sound was gone, Jeff could fully immerse himself in the man cave experience as it was meant to be, and before long, he had completely forgotten about the buzz that tortured him for months. Jeff was nodding off when the buzz woke him up. It wasn't like the other times, though. This time it was one continuous sound instead of multiple short buzzes. Its return instantly annoyed him, and Jeff decided to put an end to it once and for all. He was so happy when it was gone, and he wouldn't let anything ruin that. Jeff turned off the TV and honed in on the sound. After that, he started following it, and before long he was pushing his ear up against the wall. That was it. The exact location of whatever it was that caused the buzzing was right beneath his ear. He marked the spot and grabbed his sledgehammer, completely unaware that this adventure had just begun.